Welcome to another episode of Power Hour. This is Pastor Ty here with my good friend.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Pastor Garrett from Spark Church in Wesley Chapel, Florida.
Let's go. So, Pastor Garrett, I'd say longtime friend, but I'd say, short-term friend, but long-term potential over here. We met online about a year ago, met in person about 6 months ago. Glad to have you here. I just want to give, you just spoke here this last week, and I'd love to give our church and our listeners an opportunity just to learn more about you, get to know you more. So why don't we just start with, who are you? Tell us your story. Tell us about launching Spark Church, all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in and out of church a little bit as a kid, and gave my life to Jesus at 12 years old. Went to church through high school, but I never really had a relationship with Jesus. I was really good at kickball, and we played kickball at youth group.
Come on.
And so when I went off to college, I never went back to church. I think that's the story of so many people. And so when I went off to college, I never went back to church. And I had a moment in college where right before I graduated that my father committed suicide. That really messed me up. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And so it really did a lot of damage in my life. I started drinking a lot and just really started to spin out of control. And that's when I realized, as my brother, who also went through the same experience, but he had a relationship with Jesus, he seemed fine. I didn't have anything to lean on. And so I just tried to do it on my own. It didn't work. Obviously my life kind of spun out of control for a period of time. And then when I was tired of running, I actually got hired by the ministry my brother was working at. He begged me to move to Florida to join this ministry. And so I went down there and joined it just as an escape, not to get closer to Jesus, but I just needed to get off the road and escape from my life. And when I went down there, God truly got a hold of me. And so we would travel and speak at different churches, and it was kind of like a teen challenge. Mm-hmm. And we'd take the guys, we'd speak at a bunch of different churches. I've spoken at over 100 churches in Florida. And then after about 5 years, God had led me to join a church staff. And so I went into ministry. I left there, went into church ministry, where I took a 50% pay cut just to go join the church.
As you do. Come on.
And then a couple years into that, God, we had this little tiny thing called COVID that kind of like shut the world down. And
yeah, never heard of it.
Yeah, it's didn't affect very many people. And so in COVID, God called us to launch a new kind of church. And
let's go.
And we were just perfectly in a place where I wasn't attending anywhere. We weren't going anywhere. We weren't working. It was just kind of in this lull in between season. And God said, I want you to start a new church. And so I said, okay, I don't know what to do. I called a church planter and I said, what if God's calling me to do this? And he said, well, you need to go to a launch event, go to CMN launch event, whatever the next one is. Go there, God will make it clear to you. And so the next one was the next week in Richmond, Virginia. Oh, man. And so we jumped in a car and drove from South Florida to Richmond, Virginia, went to the launch event, and there God spoke to us. We did the Shark Tank. We won second place in the Shark Tank.
Congratulations.
And that was God. That was the confirmation we needed.
Yeah.
And so we launched Spark Church. We started the process as soon as we got home from that.
Yeah.
And he opened the door to a movie theater in our town, which is amazing during COVID because people couldn't gather more than 15 people or whatever that rule was. And God did a lot and opened some doors. And so we launched in March of 2021. So it's been about 5 years now that we've been open.
Well, man, not only is launching a church something pretty bold, but to launch a church in the middle of COVID of all things, that takes some bold faith. Yeah. Talk to our listeners a little bit about what it means to have bold faith, both as a church planter, but just as a believer. Like, what does that look like for you?
Kind of what we talked about in the sermon today. When you see God move in your life, that is when you should pick up those moments where you've seen him answer your prayer request. And the next time you pray, you need to remember the time that he did. In the Old Testament, they would go around and they would build these altars where God had already moved in their life. And they would say, this is where God had moved in Abraham's life. This is where God had moved in Isaac's life. And so then when the people are traveling back around, they would find these altars of moments where God had moved in the past, and it would grow their faith. That's what the Bible's talking about, going from faith to faith. Yeah. And so when we look at going faith to faith, that helps us have that bold faith because I've seen him do it in the past.
Let's go.
When we planted the church, I had no idea it was going to explode the way it did. I wasn't looking for a mega church. We started with one other family in our living room. We had 4 people and 3 dogs that started Spark Church in our living room. That other couple didn't even make it to launch. They came to one Sunday and never came back. It's just amazing to see that God took something that was nothing in the living room and what he's done. And so every door that opened, it grew my faith to ask for more.
Yeah.
And like, let's go more, let's go more. And now we're in this place where God is calling us to launch new campuses. He's calling us to launch a school. He's calling us to do bigger and bigger things that I could have never done 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But because I've seen him move in my life, I've seen it just grows your faith over time. And so if you need bold faith, you got to remember the times he's already answered you in your life.
I love that. I love hearing that. I love that your church name is very unique too. I've never heard of another Spark Church. I'm sure there's one out there.
Just one other one.
Yeah. Oh, see, there you go. There you go. Just like, you don't come in contact with too many powerhouse churches. So I love that Spark is pretty unique.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why Spark Church. What ignited that?
Sure. That's a nice play on words. So
Come on.
So when I was working at a church in a small town in Florida, I was the executive pastor, and I started, actually this was before I was even hired on at that church. I'm sorry. This was when I was still at the Teen Challenge ministry, or kind of like a Teen Challenge.
Yeah.
And when we were there, I was trying to figure out a way to help the local church. I read it in a Bill Hybels book that the local church is the last hope of the world.
I love that.
And I truly believe that, and I still believe that to this day. And that does everything I do is I believe the local church is the last hope. So I was trying to figure out, how do I sow into a local church when I can't be a part of one? I'm in this para-ministry. I can't work at a church. How do I pour into the local church? So I started something called Spark Ministries, where I would go to local churches and we would do Spark events for their men's ministry, because I was in a men's ministry, and so that was kind of my specialty. So I brought my tomahawks, my archery stuff. I brought a pull-up bar and my BB gun, and we would do Spark events for churches in our community.
Come on.
And the goal was to, and I would preach a little message at it over like a men's breakfast.
Yeah.
The goal was to spark the men's ministries on fire in our community. That was just, the Bible is so clear on whatever your sphere of influence is. That's your specialty. When God pulled you out of something, he sends you right back in to tell people what he did. Yeah. And so because I was out of this men's ministry world, God sent me back into men's ministries to help spark other ministries on fire. So I did that for a couple years. We were doing men's ministry at different churches and different things. And it was all free. It was just me trying to just pour back into the church and help churches. So when God called us to launch a church, and the guy said, go to the first event, they make you put on the application your church name. We didn't want to launch a church. We didn't know we wanted to launch a church. Yeah. And I said, I have no idea what to put. And my wife is the one that said, why don't you put Spark Ministries, Spark Church? That's because remember you had the Spark events. Yeah. And why don't you use that and that be the name? And I said, okay, whatever. I didn't think anything of it because we just had to put it down, and so I just put it down like whatever. We don't even know if we're going to launch a church, but that was the name. Then when we did the Shark Tank and I presented Spark Church, that was it. That was when we knew. That was when we knew that Spark Church was the name, and that was the vision that God had put in our hearts.
I love that. I think that a name that really signifies not only just your passion, but your mission and your vision, I think is powerful. That's super powerful. I didn't know this, so I'm really curious to ask, because one of my big things is I believe that church and Jesus is for manly men, right? We're both standing here wearing square toe boots. For those of you that don't know, man, Pastor Garrett and his church came over to our church here in Idaho and have been working hard, and by hard, I mean really hard. He spent a 14-hour day with us, just doing all kinds of stuff. And I just really appreciate meeting guys that are, not soft, but just like manly men for Jesus. So with you doing men's ministry, talk to me about that, about what it looks like to reach men for Jesus.
Well, not only, what it looks like, but it's vital. I mean, it is vital. The Bible is so clear on, the head of the household is the husband. And so when you think about a family, the husband should be the one drawing the family to church.
Yes.
They should be if your wife is the head of the household, something's wrong, something's off. It should be the man. And so plus I think even when you look at all the biblical examples in scripture, they're manly men. Samson was a manly dude. Abraham was a manly guy. Yeah. Jesus was a carpenter. That's a manly thing. They were all manly men doing men's things, which is scripture. The most manly thing I can do is lead my family to Jesus.
Let's go.
That's the most manly thing you can do because that affects eternity, right? And so it's vital. It's vital.
No, I love that. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, man, too many churches you see, even coming here, there's some great ladies that bless their heart that the church was it's a little more pink, a lot of flowers. And the first thing I said is, do we want men in this church? Because then we've got to cater. Something I found is that women will go to a manly environment, men won't go into
Sure.
a more feminine environment. So I think making churches seek after the men so that they can then lead their families is huge. I know you're aware of this, but just maybe for our listeners, one of the things I love is they say if if a mother and a wife get saved, there's a pretty low chance that the rest of the family come. But if the man gets saved, and that wife and kids are quick behind. And so, and we just unapologetically, which it sounds like we are very similar in that way, pursue men because we just believe that's the hope.
I think 10 years ago, I think there was this trend of churches were mostly female. Every church I would go visit and speak at, it was just it outweighed the population. I mean, the percentage of female and which is great. There's so many different reasons that could have been, but I think we just had such a fatherless epidemic going on. But I'm really seeing that trend turn around.
Yes.
I mean, in our church, we are having a lot more men. And I think it's, like you said, I think it helps that the pastor is the most manly person in the town. So that helps. Stuff like, giving them a way to serve, I think is huge.
Yep.
I mean, our safety team is one of our biggest teams because it gives them a purpose and they want to go in there and serve and protect because that's what we're called to do.
Yep.
And so I think I've seen this big trend starting to switch, where we're starting to see more and more single dad. Actually, in our church, we're starting to see a lot of dads bringing the kids and the moms aren't coming. I mean, it's just very interesting how it's that's switching.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, obviously, we want moms there too, but it's cool to say men take the lead on the spiritual faith of their family. That's, like you said, when we were growing up, that wasn't unheard of, never seen, and so it's cool to see that paradigm shift. I love that. Well, I think one of the other things, and I've talked a little bit about it, but I'd love to talk more, is, man, you're a hard worker. And let's be honest, most of us as pastors have heard the cliche, oh, you only work one day a week, you only do this.
Sure.
Like me and that's not true, but I think
course.
it's great when a church by their pastor knows that's not true. So can you talk to us a little bit about how hard work plays into your ministry and your calling, and why you would encourage not just pastors, but maybe even believing Christian men and women, why they should work hard for Jesus?
Sure. So we have been in our church, we've been in a remodel. We in the end of 2024, we had a church reach out to us that said, hey, our church is about to close. We see you in the community doing ministry, doing outreach. Your church is exploding. It's on the up and up. We want to merge with you so you can save our building. They had about 20 people at the time. And so we merged. We took over this $4 million property. Incredible. Lots of space, multiple buildings. And ever since then, we have been in a constant remodel. I mean, since that moment. And we really dove into it last summer. And so when you're constantly remodeling the building, like we've been doing here at Powerhouse, but we've been in it for a year at our church, you're going to need to work.
Yep.
And actually, I believe that God gave us the building because he knew I would put the time into it to make it work.
I love that. I love that.
Every pastor I've ever served under they weren't going to be doing the manual stuff.
Yep.
But if you're talking about reaching men, and reaching dads and reaching head of households and reaching blue collar workers, you better be working beside them. I mean, you're sitting in the office and those people are going to leave your church.
Yep.
They want someone that looks like them. And so Jesus was a blue collar worker.
Yep.
So I think that's just so vital too. And I make sure, and I teach my staff this too, that if people are here working, you're working with them. I don't care if you're going to break your nail. I don't care if it's not your specialty. You don't need to be a carpenter. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to be willing to lend a hand and be a part of it.
Yeah.
I think, well, we know the Bible says that, when you're faithful with little, you'll be given more. Mm-hmm. If you can't be faithful with what you have, he's not going to give you more.
Yep.
I think hard work is how we be faithful with what we have.
No, I love that. I so agree with you. It saddens me when I meet pastors that kind of give merit to those jokes, you know what I mean, of working one day a week, where it's like, man, I think you just got into this because you want a nice office job, or you know what I mean, where you have air conditioning.
They like the authority.
Yeah.
They
want
like
to
the
go
attention.
out to lunch all the time and all that kind of stuff, the attention and stuff. And so I just love, and I think this is another highlight of that culture's changing, you know what I mean? And Paul often compares being a Christian and being even like a pastor to being a soldier. Mm. He uses hardworking people, he uses soldiers. Like, it's very clear this is not a job for the weak or the passive. Yeah. And I'm just so thankful that I think we came the last few decades from a time in church history where a lot of men were kind of more passive and they didn't want to upset anyone and they want to make sure everything was good and everybody was agreeable. And I just love seeing pastors, man, just really set the tone and set the example of what it means to be a faithful Christ follower, having those hard conversations, working hard, leading their family, doing all the things, and ultimately just trying to be more like Jesus is the best they can.
Yeah.
Man, I love that.
Well, I mean, I think for any pastors listening, I think pastors are always looking for, how do I grow my church?
Yep.
What's the secret?
Yeah.
What God's doing in Spark Church? What's the secret for us? It's go work along the people. I mean, it's go put the work in. Again, you can be faithful. If you're faithful with little, He'll give you more.
Yep.
If he knows you're going to be lazy, I hate lazy people. That's just I cannot stand lazy.
Yeah.
Most of the disciples were fishermen. That's not lazy.
Yeah.
They were workers. And so when I look at that and that directly ties to their ministry of how lazy and how much work they're willing to put in.
Yeah.
Since we got a building, since we were portable, we were portable for several years. And then we got this building given to us. I've had so many, I can't tell you how many people have called pastors. How do I get a building? How do I get a building? And every single time I say the same thing. For one, it wasn't us, it was God.
Yeah.
But for two, are you going to put in the work once you get it?
No,
because if He knows you're not going to do it, He's not going to give it to you. Then He's going to give it to us because He knows we're going to put in the work.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And especially, I think from a church planting or even revitalization mindset, man, you don't got money to pay someone else to do stuff. So, man, if you can work hard and go to YouTube University to learn what you got to learn, man, it's gonna go well for you.
And it will grow your church because the people see that.
Yep.
People want to go to a place where the pastor's working with them. We're in this mission together.
Yeah, and I mean, no one wants to serve at a church where the pastor's unwilling to serve, and no one wants to give at a church where they're worried, where's the money going? And if you can show in your building and in things that you're doing that people don't even have to ask, they see where the money's going, I think it really adds merit to what you're saying. It gives fruit, like tangible fruit to what you're doing.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I think I just wanted to end lastly by just asking you, Garrett, what's one piece of unsolicited advice, like maybe best advice you've ever heard that you want to give pastors, Christians, men, women, whoever it is, that you're like, man, if you just apply this, I think it'll really kind of change the paradigm of your life?
I think the be faithful with little and to get more. I think that's just so vital in our lives. I think that's the key, especially to a church planter. I coach a lot of pastors, and that's what I tell them all. If you're expecting $1 million gift, then you haven't been stewarding what you already have. You're expecting some big shift, and you're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to get every family one by one.
Yeah.
We know the struggle. We've been there, and if you're not willing to put in the work, it's not going to happen. If you're not faithful with what you have, you're never going to grow. Yeah. But I think the other thing too, just for non-pastors, but just Christians, would be look at the fruit. Look at the fruit of whoever you're following. Look at the fruit of whoever enters your life. Look at the fruit of the church down the road. I just see people get deceived so easily. The wolves are in our churches.
Yep.
Wolves in sheep's clothing are here.
Yep.
And there's so many YouTube, preachers that are just leading people astray. And I just say, look at the fruit. Yep. When you look at a pastor or a church, or I remember when I was seeking out coaching, and I remember someone reaching out to me, and they probably have an amazing soul, but their church was 15 people. And I just I wasn't very nice, but I just said, well, what are you going to teach me? When we're 250, you know what I mean? You can teach me how to be faithful. I'm sure I can learn things from you. I love to learn things. I can learn from anyone, but not church growth when you haven't done it yourself.
No, that's so good.
And so I think that's so key, is look at the fruit. Put people in your life, pick mentors that have been where you want to go.
Yeah.
This is not a bragging thing, or because I give all credit to God, but I love that all of my mentors before I became a pastor, that now we've even grown past them, and I can turn around and mentor them.
That's so good.
So it's like now I've been to a place that they haven't, and now I can turn around and pour into them, and they can look at the fruit and they can say, clearly, there's someone we want to learn from. I'm always trying to learn from someone who's been where I want to go. And so when you're picking mentors, I think everyone needs to have mentors. I think everyone needs to have coaches. Look at the fruit.
No, that's so good. And I know I told you the last one was the last one, but man, I'm just enjoying talking to you. So let's get a little bit of a bonus one going in. Pastor Garrett, people can tell even just listening to this, you're a passionate guy. So you tell me, you're a busy guy, you're working hard, you have a new daughter at home, you got your pups, your wife, you're remodeling, you're doing all kinds of big stuff, you're going to other churches to help them. How do you keep your passion and your energy strong, pouring your life out like this? Like, man, I always think this is good because I admire people that can go. So what do you do to not only stay passionate, but to stay strong?
I probably don't do enough Sabbath is what I do. That's
Okay.
probably one of the
I appreciate
the
your
low
honesty.
pieces.
No, I appreciate your honesty.
However, I think it goes back to seeing faith upon faith. You know, when I see God move in a situation, it wants me to go for more.
Yeah.
And I have a saying that I live my life by, that when I get to heaven, I want to be completely spent. I don't want to have energy. I don't want to end with a bank account. Like, I want to spend everything I have, money, time, energy. I want to give it all to God so that when I roll into heaven, I want to limp into heaven and collapse on the ground and be like, I gave it all for you, Jesus.
That's so good.
I mean, it's making me tear up now just thinking about that moment. And so and we live our church like that too.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have a big savings account. We don't store money. We just, everything we do, we just pour it straight into the community and into the church. And so I think that you will stay fired up when you're doing what God's called you to do. If you're doing things that you're not called to do, you're going to burn out very quickly. You can keep your passion up if you stay focused on what God's called you to do. And then you look at the fruit, you look at the faith that you've earned from the last time. You look at the moments that God's moved. Every time God moves, it makes me want to go harder. You know, when we did our first church remodel of another church, it exploded after we worked. I coached the pastor. We poured into the building, we did a mission trip, and they went from 14 people to over 100 people in 8 months.
Yeah.
I mean, in a town of pretty much like 100 people. I mean, it was insane. And so that made me want to go harder. Like, now I'm ready, because I'm seeing God use me. I'm seeing God use our church. I'm seeing the actual, the miracles happen that make me want to say, let's do more. If he can do this, he can do more.
I love that. I love that. Well, man, I think that's it for today, it for this episode. But Pastor Garrett, again, for speaking for our listeners, for our church, everything that you've done, we just really appreciate you. And we hope this is not the last time, not only on an episode, but at our church, man. We love you. And we look forward to hearing more from you.
Hey, you guys have an amazing church. So thank you, Powerhouse Church, for having us. It was amazing. So
awesome. No, that's great. And we will catch you guys on the flippity on the next one. And until then, keep after it. Let's experience the power of God together.